Fang, Part 1. The Proving Ground. Forest moon of Desert 4 was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are, with towering trees that blocked out the twin suns and shadows that seemed to move when you were not looking directly at them. Kira Vance had been on this moon for 7 months now, and she still had not gotten used to the way the other cadets looked at her. She was 19 years old, born on Earth in a small town that nobody in the galaxy had ever heard of. And she was the only human at the Galactic Coalition's most elite military academy. The other cadets came from species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, before humans had even discovered fire, and they never let her forget it. "The human is slowing us down again," Turek said, his 4 eyes blinking in that pattern that Kira had learned meant Anoyan's Turek was a Volari, tall and thin with blue-gray skin that changed color with his moods. And he had made it his personal mission to remind everyone that humans did not belong here. Kira said nothing because she had learned that words did not change minds, only actions did. Their squad was deep in the wilderness zone, 12 kilometers from the academy compound, on what was supposed to be a routine survival examination. And Commander Reth had dropped them here at dawn with nothing but basic supplies and a simple order: survive for 3 days and return. There were 6 of them in the squad, and Kira knew that she was the weakest on paper. Turek was faster, and his species could see in 4 spectrums of light. Mira was a Thesari native who had grown up in forests like this one and knew every plant and animal by name. Gorik was a Kreth, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with arms thick enough to crush stone. Veth was another Thesari, younger than Mira, with bioluminescent patches on his skin that glowed soft blue when he was nervous. And Liane was a Silathi, graceful and quick, the daughter of a diplomat who had joined the Rangers to prove she was more than her family name. They were all stronger than Kira, faster than Kira, and their senses were sharper than anything a human could match. But none of them had grown up on Earth. None of them understood what that meant. The attack came without warning. One moment Turek was complaining about the pace, and the next moment something exploded from the undergrowth in a blur of black scales and gleaming teeth. Kira did not think. Her body moved before her mind could catch up. And this was the gift that Earth had given her species across millions of years of running and fighting and surviving against things with bigger claws and sharper teeth. She was moving while the others were still processing what they were. Seeing the creature was a Wraith Stalker. She would learn the name later, and it was one of the deadliest predators on Desert 4. A thing of muscle and hunger that could kill a Kreth warrior before the warrior even knew it was there. It was heading for Veth, drawn by the fear light pulsing from his skin. And it was fast, but Kira was already there. Her hand found her blade without looking. Muscle memory from years of training that had started when she was barely old enough to walk. And she did not try to block or parry, because you did not block something that weighed twice what you did. Stepped into its path and cut. The blade opened the creature's throat in a single clean motion, and the Wraith Stalker was dead before its body hit the ground. Sliding past her and crashing into the undergrowth with a wet thump, Kira stood there for a moment, blood dripping from her blade, her heart pounding in her chest, but her hands completely steady. Then she looked up at her squad. They were staring at her. Turek's skin had gone pale gray, which she had never seen before, and his 4 eyes were wide with something that might have been fear. Myra had her weapon half drawn, frozen in the act of responding to a threat that was already gone. Gorik had not moved at all, which Kira knew was a Kreth survival reflex. But his massive jaw was hanging open. Veth's bioluminescence was flickering wildly, cycling through colors that she did not have names for. Liane was just watching her with an expression that Kira could not read. Commander Reth emerged from the trees. He was a Torvon, a species of reptilian warriors with crests of bone and scale that rose and fell with their emotions. And he had been following them at a distance as part of the examination protocol. His crest was fully raised, something Kira had never seen him do, and he was looking at his timer. 2.3 seconds, he said. His voice flat and controlled in that way that meant he was hiding something. From first movement to killing blow, he looked at Kira, and she saw something in his eyes that she did not understand. That is faster than any recorded response time for your species. Cadet Vance. Kira wiped her blade clean and sheathed it. I did not count, she said. Commander Reth's crest lowered slowly, but it did not go all the way down. Where did you learn to move like that? He asked. Kira thought about the question for a moment. She thought about her father teaching her to hunt in the forests of Montana, about her mother showing her how to gut a fish before she was 5 years old, about the boxing lessons and the wrestling matches and the endless hours of practice that had been as natural as breathing, she thought, about what it meant to grow up on a world where humans had not always been at the top of the food chain, where her ancestors had learned to kill mammoths and saber-toothed cats with nothing but sharpened sticks and determination. Earth, she said simply. Commander Reth looked at her for a long moment, and then he looked at the dead Wraithstalker, and then he looked back at her. The examination is suspended, he said, his voice tight. We are returning to the compound immediately. Why? Torek demanded, his arrogance returning now that the immediate danger had passed. Because the human got lucky with one kill. Commander Reth turned to look at Torek, and his crest rose again. Because Wraithstalkers do not hunt alone, he said. And because this one should not have been able to get past the perimeter shields. He paused and looked out into the forest, where the shadows seemed darker than they had been a moment ago. Something is very wrong. Kira felt the hair on the back of her neck rise. An ancient warning system that her species had carried since before they had words for fear. She looked into the darkness between the trees, and she knew that Commander Reth was right. Something was out there and it was hunting them. The Academy compound was in chaos when they arrived. Kira had never seen so many species running in so many directions, and the air was filled with shouted orders and the hum of weapons being charged. Commander Reth left them at the barracks with orders to stay inside. But within an hour, the truth had spread through every corridor and dormitory like wildfire. The perimeter shields had failed across the entire eastern sector. Wraithstalkers were inside the safe zone, and 3 cadets were already dead. Kira sat on her bunk and listened to the others talk, their voices high and fast with fear, and she tried to make sense of the information that was coming in through the Academy's emergency channels. The creatures were not supposed to be this organized. Wraithstalkers were solitary hunters according to everything the Coalition knew about them. But these ones were moving in packs, and they were targeting specific areas almost like they were being directed. Communications are down, Lien said, her elegant fingers dancing across her personal terminal. Not just damaged, but actively jammed by something. How is that possible? Myra asked, her sorry eyes wide with confusion. These are animals. Maybe they are not just animals anymore, Kira said quietly. Everyone looked at Hirsch. She had noticed that they did that more often now. Ever since the forest. Ever since they had watched her kill something that should have killed her. What do you mean? Veth asked, his bioluminescence pulsing with nervous energy. Something led them through the shields, Kira said. Something is jamming our communications and something is coordinating their attacks. So either these creatures suddenly got very smart or someone is controlling them. The silence that followed was heavy with implications that none of them wanted to examine too closely. The door to their barracks slid open and Commander Reth stepped inside. His crest was flat against his skull, which Kira had learned meant he was controlling strong emotions. And his eyes swept across the room until they found her, Cadet Vance. he said. You are being reassigned. Kira stood. To where Hunting Squad 7, he said. And something in his voice told her that this was not good news. We are forming emergency response teams to sweep the Eastern Forest, and you have been assigned as support element. Support element. That was a polite way of saying that none of the other squad leaders wanted a human in their unit. So they had dumped her with the cadets that nobody else wanted either. Kira looked around the barracks and found Veth and Gorak and Lien watching her. They were part of Squad 7, of course they were. The other commanders believe your kill was luck, Commander Reth said quietly, stepping closer so that only she could hear. They think you are a liability, and they want you as far from the real fighting as possible. And what do you think? Kira asked. Commander Reth's crest twitched. Just slightly. I think those commanders have never met a human before, he said. I think they do not understand what your species is capable of, and I think that by the time they learn the truth, it will be too late for them to change their minds. He handed her a datapad with their assigned patrol route. Keep your squad alive. Cadet Vance, and prove me right. Then he was gone. And Kira was left looking at the faces of the 3 cadets who had been assigned to her. Karaveth was the youngest, barely 18 by coalition standards. And his bioluminescent skin was flickering so fast that it almost looked like he was vibrating. Gorak was massive and strong, but Kira knew that his species had a freezing reflex when ambushed, a survival mechanism that made them hold perfectly still until danger passed, which was not very useful when the danger was coming straight for you. And Lien was graceful and intelligent, but she had never seen real combat, had never felt the hot spray of blood on her face or heard the sound a creature makes when it dies. None of them were ready for what was waiting in that forest, but Kira was. She gathered them in the corner of the barracks, and she spoke quietly so that the other squads could not hear. Forget everything the academy taught you, she said. They stared at her. What? Lien asked. The coalition trains you to fight other soldiers, Kira said. It teaches you tactics and formations and rules of engagement. But those rules were made for enemies that think like you do. And these creatures do not think like you. She looked at each of them in turn, meeting their eyes and holding them until they looked away. I am going to teach you how to hunt. Hunt, Gorak rumbled, his deep voice vibrating in his chest. We are not hunters, we are rangers. No, Kira said. Right now you are prey, and those things out there know it. So tonight we are going to change that, and we are going to teach them what it means to be afraid. The twin suns were setting by the time they reached their patrol zone, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if they were not walking into a forest full of things that wanted to eat them. Kira moved differently. Now in the academy she had always tried to fit in, to move like the others moved and think like they thought. But that was over. Now she moved the way her ancestors had moved, the way humans had moved for 100,000 years before they had built cities or invented writing or dreamed of reaching the stars. She moved like a predator. Stay close, she whispered. Watch the shadows and listen to the silence. What does that mean? Veth asked, his voice trembling. When the forest goes quiet, it means something dangerous is near, Kira said. The prey animals stop moving, and they stop making noise because they are afraid. So silence is a warning. She stopped and tilted her head. Listening, the forest was quiet. They are already here, she said. Gorak's body went rigid as his freezing reflex started to take hold, and Veth's skin was blazing with fear light that might as well have been a beacon. And Lien was reaching for her weapon with hands that shook. They were going to die if Kira did not do something. Gorak, she said sharply, cutting through his instinctive response. I need you to freeze, but I need you to do it on purpose. So when I give the word, you become a statue, and you do not move until I tell you. That is my weakness, he said through gritted teeth. No, Kira said. It is bait and Veth. I need you to kill your light. I cannot control it, he said, his voice breaking. When I am scared, it just happens. Then stop being scared, Kira said. Because right now your fear is a signal fire telling every predator in this forest exactly where we are. She grabbed his shoulders and forced him to look at her. You are not prey, she said. Say it. I am not prey, he whispered. Louder. I am not prey. The light on his skin flickered and dimmed. Just a little good, Kira said, and she turned to Lien. You are going to be my eyes because you can see things. I cannot, and I need you to tell me what is moving in the shadows. Lien nodded, her fear slowly being replaced by focus. Now, Kira said, drawing her blade. We hunt. The first Wraith Stalker came at them from the left, and Kira was ready. She did not kill it, she wounded it and let it run. Because wounded prey leaves a blood trail, and blood trails lead back to the pack. And tonight Kira was not running from the darkness, she was going to walk straight into it. The blood trail led deeper into the forest where the trees grew so thick that even the moonlight could not reach the ground. Kira moved through the darkness like she had been born in it, her feet finding solid ground without making a sound, her eyes adjusting to the shadows until she could see shapes and movement where the others saw nothing. Behind her, her squad followed. They were learning Veth had managed to dim his bioluminescence to a faint glow that barely reached past his own skin. And Kira could see the effort it cost him with every step. Gorak moved like a mountain made of muscle, his freezing reflex held in check by sheer willpower and the knowledge that Kira would tell him when to use it, and Lien had become her second pair of eyes. Her Sci-Fi senses picking up movement in the shadows and reporting it with quick hand signals that they had invented on the move. They were becoming something new. They were becoming hunters. 3 on the left. Lien signaled, her fingers dancing in the darkness. Kira nodded and adjusted their path, leading them around the ambush without the creatures ever knowing they had been spotted. This was how humans had survived on Earth, by being the strongest or the fastest or the most dangerous, but by being smart and patient and willing to walk 100 kilometers to wear down prey that could outrun them in a sprint. Persistence hunting. The scientists called it the ability to simply never stop the wraith. Stalkers did not understand this. They were used to being the apex predator, used to prey that ran in panic or froze in fear. And they did not know what to do with creatures that tracked them through the night like ghosts. The first real attack came an hour after midnight. 3 Wraith Stalkers burst from the shadows in perfect coordination, their black scales drinking the faint light and their claws reaching for flesh. Gorak now. Kira shouted. The massive Kreth froze in place, every muscle locking into stone-like stillness. And the lead Wraith Stalker hesitated for just a fraction of a second, because its instincts told it that frozen prey was not a threat. That fraction of a second was all Kira needed. She came in from the side, her blade finding the soft spot behind the creature's skull, and it dropped without a sound. Veth moved then, faster than Kira had ever seen him move. His fear transformed into something else as he tackled the second creature and drove his knife into its alien. Took the third, her movements graceful even in violence, her training finally clicking into place. When it mattered most, 3 Wraith Stalkers dead in less than 5 seconds. Kira looked at his squad and felt something. That might have been pride. How did you know that would work? Gorak asked, his body slowly unlocking from its frozen state. Because I watched you, Kira said. I saw what you thought was your weakness, and I found a way to make it a strength. Because that is what humans do. What do you mean? Veth asked, wiping blood from his hands with shaking fingers that were steadier than they had been an hour ago. Kira sheathed her blade and looked up at the canopy of trees that blocked out the stars. My species spent most of its history as prey, she said. We were slower than the cats that hunted us and weaker than the bears that could tear us apart. and we could not see in the dark or hear danger coming from a kilometer away. She looked at them, her human eyes reflecting the faint light of Veth's skin. But we learned and we adapted, and we turned every weakness into a weapon. So when the cats were faster, we learned to set traps, and when the bears were stronger, we learned to hunt in groups, and when the night was dark, we learned to use fire. She started walking again, following the blood trail that led deeper into the darkness. You think your freezing reflex is a weakness, she said to Gorok. But I see a warrior who can become invisible to predators that hunt by movement. You think your light is a liability, she said to Veth. But I see a signal that can draw enemies exactly where we want them. You think your lack of combat experience makes you useless, she said to Lien. But I see someone who notices details that trained warriors would miss. She stopped and turned to face them. The Coalition looks at my species and sees something small and weak and fragile. And they are right, because we are all of those things. But they do not understand that we have always been those things, and we survived anyway. The second attack came 2 hours later. And this time, Kira let Veth take the lead. He stood in a clearing with his bioluminescence blazing like a beacon, fear and determination warring on his face. And when the Wraith Stalkers came for him, they found Gorok and Lien and Kira. Waiting in the shadows, 4 more creatures died the third attack. Never Came Kira stood at the edge of a rocky outcropping, as dawn began to paint the sky in shades of gray, and she listened to the forest waking up around them. They have stopped hunting us, Lien said, her voice filled with wonder. No, Kira said. They have started avoiding us. She could feel it in the way the shadows moved, in the subtle sounds of creatures that were choosing different paths through the undergrowth. In the silence that followed them now, not because danger was near, but because they had become the danger. We killed 9 of them, Veth said, staring at his hands like he did not recognize them. I killed 3 of them myself. His bioluminescence was steady now, a soft blue glow that pulsed with calm rhythm instead of the frantic flickering of fear. How do you feel? Kira asked. Edveth looked at her, and something had changed in his eyes. I feel like I am not prey anymore, Kira smiled, a rare expression that her squad had never seen before. Good, because the night is not over yet. She pointed toward the horizon where the first rays of sunlight were beginning to touch the tops of the trees. And far below, where the shadows still held their grip, she could see something that did not belong. Structure made of stone and metal, ancient and massive, hidden in a valley that the Academy's map showed as empty. What is that? Gorok asked. That is where the blood trail ends, Kira said. That is where they are coming from. She started walking down the slope toward the valley, her squad falling into formation. Behind her, without hesitation, they had learned to trust her during the long night, and they had learned to trust themselves now. It was time to find out what was really hunting them and to make it stop. The structure was older than anything Kira had ever seen. It rose from the valley floor like a temple built by gods who had forgotten how to be gentle. All sharp angles and dark stone that seemed to drink the morning light. The symbols carved into its walls belonged to no language in the Coalition's records, and the doorway at its base was large enough to fit a ship through. This is pre-Coalition, Lien whispered, her diplomat's education giving her context that the others lacked. This was built before any of our species had achieved spaceflight. Maybe before any of us had even evolved. Who built it? Veth asked. I do not know, Lien said, and Kira could hear the fear creeping back into her voice. Nobody knows, because whoever they were, they have been gone for a very long time. Kira studied the entrance and the tracks in the dirt that led inside Wraith Stalker prints. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all flowing into that dark doorway like water into a drain. This was their nest. This was where they were coming from. We should go back, Gorok said, his voice tight with the effort of controlling his instincts. "We should tell Commander Reth and bring a full assault team. Our communications are still jammed," Kira said. "By the time we get back to the compound and back here again with reinforcements, the sun will have set, and they will have the advantage of darkness again." She looked at her squad, at the faces of the cadets who had followed her through the longest night of their lives. "I'm going in," she said. "You can wait here if you want." "No," Veth said immediately, his bioluminescence flaring with something that was not fear. "We stay together." Gorak nodded his massive head. Lian drew her weapon and checked its charge. Kira felt something warm in her chest, something that humans had felt since the first time they had stood together against the Darkness Pack loyalty family. They moved into the temple in formation, Kira on point with her blade drawn, Lian covering the rear, Gorak and Veth guarding the flanks. The corridor was wide enough for all of them to walk side by side, and the walls were covered with more of those strange symbols that seemed to shift and move in the corner of Kira's vision. They found the first bodies 50 meters in, Coalition Rangers. A full squad of 6, their armor torn open and their blood painting the walls. They had been elite soldiers with decades of experience between them, carrying weapons that could punch through starship hulls. And something had killed them like they were nothing. Ancestors preserve us. Gorak breathed. Kira knelt beside one of the bodies and studied the wounds. Deep claw marks that had cut through military-grade armor like it was paper. Bite marks from jaws, powerful enough to crush bone. But also something else, burn marks. The kind of burns that came from energy weapons. But not Coalition energy weapons. Something else had been shooting at these Rangers. Something that was not a Wraithstalker. They were caught in a crossfire, Kira said. The creatures came from one direction, and something else hit them from another. "What else is in here?" Veth asked, his voice barely a whisper. Kira stood and looked deeper into the darkness. "Let us find out." They moved carefully past the bodies, stepping over fallen weapons and shattered equipment, and the corridor opened into a massive chamber that stole Kira's breath. It was a breeding pen. Dozens of Wraith stalkers moved through the space, some of them feeding on things that Kira did not want to look at too closely, others sleeping in piles of scaled bodies, and more of them tending to eggs that pulsed with a sickly inner light. But that was not the worst part. Worst part was the creature in the center of the chamber. It was a Wraithstalker, but it was wrong, 3 times the size of the others, with cybernetic implants grafted onto its skull and spine, its eyes glowing with artificial intelligence, its claws replaced with metal that gleamed like polished murder. The Pack Mother. Someone had taken a perfect predator and made it into something worse. "That is not natural," Lian said, horror making her voice shake. "Someone built that thing." Kira understood. Now, jammed communications and the failed shields and the coordinated attacks. This was not an accident. This was a test. Someone had wanted to see what would happen when the Academy's defenses fell, and someone had been watching the results and taking notes. "We need to kill it," Kira said. "Are you insane?" Gorak demanded. "Look at it and look at those Rangers it killed. And they were faster and stronger and more experienced than any of us. They were faster and stronger than me," Kira agreed. "But they were not human." She studied the Pack Mother, watching the way it moved and the way the other creatures deferred to it. "That thing was designed to kill Coalition species," she said. "Look at its modifications and look at the way it is built. Because everything about it is optimized to counter Torvan reflexes and crest strength and Silithy speed." "So," Veth asked, "so nobody programs a weapon to fight humans," Kira said. "We are too new and too weak and too insignificant for anyone to bother studying. Which means that thing has no idea what I am capable of." She looked at her squad, at the faces that had learned to trust her during the long night. "Stay here," she said. "I am going in alone." "Kira, no," Lian said. Grabbing her arm, Kira gently removed her hand. "If I fail, then you run," she said. "You get back to the compound, and you tell Commander Reth everything. And you tell him that humans are not as weak as everyone thinks." She stepped into the chamber. Before they could argue, the Pack Mother saw her immediately. Its artificial eyes locked onto her, and it rose from its resting position with a sound like grinding metal, its cybernetic claws scraping against the stone floor. The other Wraith Stalkers scattered, clearing a path between the Pack Mother and the small creature that had walked into its domain. Kira smiled, and she began the hunt. The Pack Mother was faster than anything that size had a right to be, its cybernetic legs driving it forward like a missile made of muscle and metal. Its jaws opening to reveal teeth that could bite through armor. Kira did not try to match its speed. She ran. The creature expected her to freeze or fight, because that was what Coalition species did when faced with overwhelming force. But Kira was not Coalition. She was human, and humans knew when to run. She sprinted toward the edge of the chamber, where ancient corridors branched off into darkness, her feet pounding against stone that had been laid before her species had learned to walk upright. The Pack Mother followed, its massive body crashing through pillars and debris, its artificial eyes tracking her every movement. Good. Kira ducked into a corridor that was barely wide enough for her shoulders, and she heard the Pack Mother slam into the entrance behind her with a sound like a starship hitting atmosphere. It was too big to follow, but it was smart enough to find another way. Kira ran through the darkness, her hands trailing along the walls to guide her, her lungs burning and her heart pounding. And she listened to the sound of the creature circling around to cut her off. This was what her ancestors had done. They had not killed mammoths by being stronger. They had killed them by being smarter, by running and hiding and waiting until the perfect moment to strike. Kira found a chamber where 3 corridors met, and she stopped in the center and she waited. The Pack Mother appeared at one entrance, its eyes glowing in the darkness, its breath coming in mechanical huffs that echoed off the ancient walls. It studied her. She could almost see it thinking, calculating, trying to understand why this tiny creature was not running anymore. "You were built to kill aliens," Kira said, her voice steady despite the fear that made her hands want to shake. "But I am not an alien, and I'm something much older." The creature lunged. Kira moved not away from it but toward it, diving under its snapping jaws and rolling between its legs, her blade finding the soft spot where flesh met machine at its rear leg. The Pack Mother screamed, a sound that was part animal and part electronic howl, and it spun to catch her, but she was already gone. She had retreated into another corridor, bleeding it slowly, making it chase her through passages that grew narrower and narrow. This was the hunt. This was what humans had done for 100,000 years before. They had built cities or invented fire or dreamed of reaching the stars. They had run their prey to exhaustion. They had bled it slowly. They had never stopped. The fight lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes of running and dodging and cutting, of leading the Pack Mother through corridors where its size was a weakness instead of a strength, of opening wounds that alone would have been nothing, but together were slowly draining its strength. The creature was slowing down. Its cybernetic systems were overheating, and its biological parts were losing blood. And for the first time since it had been created, it was experiencing something that its programming did not understand. It was afraid. Kira emerged into a small chamber, and she stopped running. Her left arm hung useless at her side, broken in 3 places where the creature had finally caught her during the 7th minute, and blood was streaming from cuts on her face and chest and legs. But she was still standing. The Pack Mother appeared at the entrance, its movements jerky and uncertain, its glowing eyes flickering like dying stars. It had never fought anything like her. It had been designed to kill species that fought with honor and rules and predictable patterns. But this small creature did not fight like that this creature fought like something that had clawed its way up from the bottom of a food chain that had tried to kill it every single day. The pack mother lunged one final time. Kira let it. She felt its jaws close around her broken arm, felt bones that were already shattered grinding together, felt pain that should have made her scream, but she did not scream. Her right hand was already moving, driving her blade up through the soft palate of the creature's mouth and into its brain. The pack mother died with Kira's arm still in its jaw. She stood there for a moment, covered in blood that was mostly not her own, and she listened to the silence that followed. Then she pulled her arm free and she walked out of the temple. Dawn had fully broken by the time she emerged, and the first thing she saw was Commander Reth standing at the entrance with a full battalion of rangers behind him. They had finally broken through the jamming. They had come to rescue whoever was left. Reth stared at her. Every ranger behind him stared at her. Kira walked toward them, her broken arm hanging at her side, her blade still dripping with the blood of the creature that had killed 2 full squads of elite soldiers. She stopped in front of Commander Reth, and she looked up at his bone crest, which was fully raised in an expression she had never seen on any Torvanthan. He did something that no human had ever witnessed. He bowed deep and low. The bow that Torvans gave only to warriors who had earned the highest respect. The bow that was reserved for legends. What do we call you? A voice asked. Kira turned and saw Veth standing at the edge of the battalion, his bioluminescence glowing steady and bright. Gorik and Lien beside him. They had not run. They had stayed, and they had guided the rescue force here. I am just a human, Kira said, but the word was already spreading through the battalion, whispered from soldier to soldier, passed along in a dozen languages until it reached the ships in orbit and the stations beyond. By nightfall, every species in the coalition had heard the name Shadowfang, not because she hunted in darkness, though she did not because she killed without mercy, though she could, but because she had made the darkness itself afraid in a shadowed chamber on a world that no coalition map had ever charted. A figure reviewed the footage from hidden cameras that had recorded every moment of the fight. The Wraith Stalker program had been designed to expose coalition weakness, to prove that the great alliance of species could be broken and scattered, but instead it had revealed something unexpected. Figure made a note in a language that was old when the stars were young. Humans, it read. Threat level requires immediate reassessment, and in the darkness beyond coalition space, something ancient began to pay attention to the small blue world called Earth.